Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and leave a legacy. This is part of a series of spotlights on remarkable business intermediaries and exit planning advisors from across the country. And joining me on this segment is Craig Brigman with Edward Jones. Craig, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark.
Craig, tell us a little bit about your work and tell us specifically who are the types of clients that you specialize in working with and helping.
So I specialize with business owners, and what I do is I help them get prepared both personally, but also financially prepared for retirement, exit, whatever their next adventure is going to be. And then we work on their business to make sure that it can exit at the highest possible output for them. So a lot of what we've looked at over time was we found that entrepreneurs, those guys, there are tons of resources for them. Every local economic development authority, SBA, they have tons of resources for the guys that are just starting out. But what we found was that for the guys who've been in business at least 3 or 4 years, even up to 30 years, there's no real resources to help them learn how to capitalize on what is really their largest asset. And so what we wanted to do was make sure not only that they were educated, but that they also had a team there to support them.
Great point. And when is like really the best time to actually plan your exit? Because I'd imagine, not every business owner plans on selling or exiting in a business. Something could happen as an emergency. When's the best time to start planning?
So realistically, you want to we like to call it the 5 Ds. You want to do something before any of these Ds occur. That's death, disability, divorce, disagreement, or distress. If you have any of those things, most of the time, the business owner is going to probably be looking to sell very quickly, which puts them in a bad position. So, in terms of when somebody should start looking, they really should start looking from the minute their business is profitable. That means that they're looking to say, how do I add value to my business so that eventually this asset, whether it's from an outside offer that they weren't expecting or an offer that's been planned and in the works for years, that way they can maximize what their business value is and turn that into real wealth.
We found throughout this series that business owners have been great at starting businesses, growth, 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 but oftentimes when it comes time to selling or exiting, they don't know where to start. Is that what you find? Are there any preconceived notions out there, or do folks even understand what an exit plan really is?
There's a lot of misconceptions. I'll give you a couple of examples. Over the last couple of years, which actually explains why we do this now, we had a lot of it. We had a lot of business owners when we talked about what is their plan for retirement, they basically told us that they're planning to sell their business. But then as they got closer to that date, they put it off, they delayed. And before you know it, they were age 68, 70, 72, and they really actually couldn't even continue the day-to-day operations. And what that meant is now they had to try and find a buyer. And so not only were they not prepared for it, they also weren't going to be able to get the value that they really thought was in that business. A lot of outside of that, we also found that a lot of business owners had an unrealistic expectation of what their business was worth. I've heard everything from 10 times the multiple of my gross revenue to I'm going to get 5 to 6 million for this $100,000 business. And so a lot of what we wanted to make sure that transpired here was that a business owner knew, one, what their business was really worth, but two, where they can add value that can increase that net worth. And so then when they do exit out, when they make that sale, they're prepared. Not only do they know their options, they had good choices, but that they exit at a higher value, which has a real impact on their long-term future.
Since exiting successfully means like proper planning, let's talk about the opposite. What are some of the biggest pitfalls or mistakes that you've seen made that causes a business owner to exit unsuccessfully?
The first one is really not being prepared personally. That that part of it, they often think in terms of, I'm going to exit out and go do exactly what I want to do, which oftentimes is their idealized version of life. For example, I had a client that said, we're going to retire and we're going to move to Colorado and live on a 100-acre, essentially rural, no contact with anybody, pastoral experience. And when I looked at the wife, you could tell that that wasn't going to be really her ideal transition. And so I asked the question, have you talked with her about this? Because you're going to go from working 60 to 80 hours a week over the last 30 years to spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with your spouse. And you can see that they thought it was a good idea, but their spouse had a completely different viewpoint. The next issue we found was that people were financially unprepared. They didn't do things in preparation financially. So really they were banking on selling the business for several $1,000,000, and then they were going to ride off into the sunset. And because they had taken no real preparation and planning ahead of time, when they didn't get the offer that they wanted, they were really disappointed. And then the last part really came down to just not knowing really what the process was. And when they went through the process, they then sold, but they really shouldn't have sold. They really weren't personally and emotionally prepared to go on to do something else. They really did want to stay with what they did, but they felt obligated that they had to stay.
Great insights, Craig. What inspired you to get into this field and help business owners with their exit plan? How did you get started?
So I got started probably about 15 to 18 years ago. I became an IRS agent, and I used to audit companies and business owners up to about $100 million in income. And then when I went on and later became a college professor, I looked at business and tax situations. And then as I came to actually financial advising and financial planning, I found that there was just no resources for these people. And over the years of consulting business owners and helping them get their business where they wanted to go, I just found that about 80% of small business owners really weren't prepared for that transition. They just had this belief that they were going to exit into the sunset with millions of dollars in the saddlebags, and realistically, they were getting offers that were 20 and 30% of that. And so what we really wanted to do was make sure not only are they emotionally and financially prepared, but the business sale doesn't become the primary means of them moving on. That business sale is more like the gravy. So if they've done everything else, when they walk away from that, that's really the icing on the cake, and that they could leave at any time and not be subject to any of those 5 Ds we talked about.
Craig, before I ask you my last question, is there anything that I didn't think to ask you that you feel is important to share, or any advice you'd like to give to business owners considering exiting their business today or soon?
Absolutely. The first thing a business owner should look at is, one, getting a SEPA involved, a certified exit planning advisor. Those people are trained to understand what you're going to go through and what you are expecting, and can walk you through that process. Then make sure that you're going to build a good team around you. That team is going to include not only your SEPA advisor, if a financial advisor like me, but also it's going to include somebody like your CPA. It's also include potentially a business broker, a business banker, an attorney who does business transactions, not the one that gets you out of trouble for the speeding ticket. But you start to build your team around you, and then you start to can really explore the options that are available. And then the next stage after that is, you really want to stay engaged. If you're going to add value to your business, you don't do it all at one time. I live by a rule: it's progress, not perfection. So as long as we're not trying to exit a business within the first 12 months, that we have some lead time, we can really work to add some value to that business and make it kind of best in class. And then the last thing really is, When you're working closely with your team, make sure that you are emotionally prepared. That means talk with your spouse, your significant other, your family about what your plans are and make sure that they are aware of it. And then you have those real conversations that are not about you having spent 10 or 15 years in your business and not being home, but really about what that's going to look like. And then that way, when you go to transition and leave, or maybe it's just your next adventure, you're selling this one for a profit and moving on, you have a game plan. And that game plan will be more valuable to you than anything else. And so while an exit plan doesn't have to be written down, it really is a good idea to get those pieces in place to help you be successful.
Sage advice for folks listening, business owners considering exiting their business soon or now, and they know they need to get their financial houses in order. And if they'd like to speak with you, how do they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Absolutely. First way, the best way to do it is connect with me on LinkedIn. My name's Craig Brigman. You can find me in Virginia. I work with Edward Jones. That's one of the best ways. It has all my office and contact information. Additionally, if you need to do something very quickly and want to talk through it, I work with clients throughout the United States. Feel free to give me a call in my office. Number's 540-966-3195. And we're happy to talk with anybody and at least figure out where you are and where you want to be.
Craig, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with my audience today, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
That was Craig Brigman with Edward Jones, and this segment's brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published to educate consumers, grow their businesses and practices, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.